Kyle Shanahan today on a conference call with regard to Steve Wilks and him being let go. A little bit more on that. And I thought this was kind of maybe the money quote and conversation. Because those of you who feel like Steve Wilks is being made to be the scapegoat, I don't know if you feel this way, Dibs. This is how I feel. This if this didn't work, it's on Kyle. It's not on Steve. Steve came in, by all accounts, tried to do what Kyle Shanahan's era and system does, and it wasn't able to click. Nick Bosa spoke openly and said Steve is really good on the back end. He's talking about the back end of the defense. He is a DB guy by trade. That's who Steve Wilks is. He tried to learn what the Niners were doing on the job, and they thought they could get there in time, and they didn't. And it doesn't mean the defense was a disaster or horrible, but it wasn't right, and we can all agree with that. You saw it. You used your eyes. With the talent they have, it should have been a better defense. My question comes to this, though. Why did you, there was no reason to go. I know maybe you liked Steve Wilks, fine. There's plenty of people out there that you like. Why did you go outside of the system and grab someone who had to learn on the fly as opposed to somebody who could fit right in? Why did you do that?
You probably thought that his positives were so great that whatever his drawbacks were, his negatives, not running the system, he could adjust to it. Guy's been a coach, as I mentioned earlier, at 15 different locales in college and in the pros. He's been a defensive coach. He's been a head coach. He's got the experience. He's got the gravitas. And you bring him in for an interview and you talk to him. And I'm sure they asked him if he could run the system. And he said, yeah, I can adjust to it. I'll run the system.
How much you paying me?
Right.
Yeah, I'll run your system.
Exactly.
No problem.
So I don't know how different it is, what he wants to run and what they ran, and how much he was unable to adjust. I do know that you had multiple times where defensive players looked like they were playing slowly this year, and they were a little bit tentative. And if that's Steve's scheme, or if they were not put in the position that they used to being in to be able to go out there and play as hard and as well as they could, well, that's on Kyle. And I agree with you there.
And here's what he said about it, by the way. The idea of forcing Wilks to work in a system that was not his norm.
That was the hardest part, and I knew that was a challenge. It was tough. It was real tough losing D'Amico. It was tough losing Solid the year before, but we had committed to not just the system, but the players that had been in the system, from our D-line, our linebackers. They had played in it for such a long time, so it was my goal to not have to change all of them, and bringing in Steve, who was unbelievable, and how loyal he was, and him trying to do it, but it just ended up not being the right fit, and so it hurt for me to do this, but that's exactly why I had to.
Yeah, so I that's the question I would have loved to be asked today. Why did you go back to last offseason? You have a system. If anybody in this world, sports world, is more stubborn and married to the way they do it, it's Kyle Shanahan, right? So why'd you leave? Why'd you leave the system and hire somebody outside of your tree? There's plenty of people from which to choose. So that'd be my only advice. Not that anybody asked for it, but next time around, dude, stay in the tree. Don't hire someone and be like, okay, crash course, let's go. No, go get somebody who does this, because you've been very good for a very long time and you have amazing players. And you're already going to have to figure some things out at the linebacker position for next year, because Dre Greenlaw's not going to play.
And Oren Burks is a free agent, and Demetrius Flanagan-Falls is also a free agent. So we talked to Larry Krueger on Monday, and he was mentioning some of the young linebackers they already have. Well, they're going to have to step in now and play a significant role. I thought it was interesting what David Lombardi of The Athletic said on his Twitter about Shanahan getting overly ambitious with the hire, figuring that the personnel and defensive structure was strong enough to allow what you're talking about, an outside the family hire to come in. You figured what you already had was strong enough to where he could come in and just kind of figure it out as he went along as the head man. And he didn't bring in his own assistants with him.
Right.
So he came in and inherited a system and had to marry his beliefs with what they already had. And Kyle Shanahan thought that would work.
But why? Again, okay, I think our structure is strong enough to withstand this. Why test it?
Because you've got a man in Steve Wilks who's been a head coach.
Sure.
And he is a strong leader. And he's a guy who has been through it many, many times. And so you bring him in. And I'm sure he did well in the interview. I'm sure he didn't come into the interview and say,
I don't know.
well, I don't know what you're running.
But someone who is so married to concept and system and the way, that's Kyle Shanahan. What's the positive? What is Steve Wilks so good at that you decided to create this barrier?
Coverage. And so you looked at your defense, and I think you looked at your defense last year and thought, what's our biggest weakness? It's not the front seven, it's the back end. So you bring in Steve Wilks, who is great as a defensive backs coach. It's what his background is. And you think, all right, Steve, you come in, you're the DC. Let's fix the back end and pretty much leave the front seven alone because the front seven is doing great. So if he comes in and fixes the back end and makes the right calls for the defense overall, it's going to be a good fit.
But was the back end bad last year?
It wasn't great.
Hufanga, Jimmy Ward, Mooney Ward, were they bad?
Ambry Thomas.
Ambry, although Ambry was worse this year than he's been.
Right.
I mean, a couple years ago, he put him into the playoffs in that game against the Rams.
I think that was your weakness last year on defense.
Lenore was getting better. I thought Lenore was fantastic at the second half of this year. Yeah.
And that's Steve Wilks.
But he was getting better, and he's already getting better. Lenore wasn't bad before this. He's a young player.
I think the secondary was an area where they definitely improved this year for the most part. But it was the front seven who, in the run defense, is where you started to have real problems in the second half of the year and in the playoffs.
Yeah. I just don't. I never understand something where you're like, okay, we're going to have a conceptual issue, but let's do it anyway because fill in that blank. I get what you're saying.
Well, maybe he was the best guy out there.
Fair answer.
And I don't remember the pool of candidates.
Anybody. You could hire anybody. There's a billion assistant coaches. All you need is a mind that works with what you do. Think of the defensive coordinators in the Kyle Shanahan era. They've all crushed it. They're all getting head coaching gigs. So why would you depart from that formula? I don't understand that. I don't understand that. So, 888-957-9570. Let's go to Nick in Berkeley. Hi, Nick. What's up?
Hey, man, a couple of weeks ago, you guys were talking about, the process, trust the process, when you deviate from the process. And it's like, I hear what you're saying. You guys are exactly right. The whole point is that why did we let D'Amico Ryan go? Why didn't we pay him? Because, maybe he was going to take, Shanahan's job if somehow Shanahan lost the Super Bowl. No one's brought that up for one thing. Another thing, why didn't you run Mason not one time during the game, bro? You didn't give Suzanne a single carry. That's so disrespectful to the player. I don't even get that. Why didn't you call timeout when the Kansas City was in the hurry up and they were going to their plays? You could have called timeout after you seen them line up. You had 3 timeouts. You didn't even burn in the first half. We could have shut them out in the first half. Shanahan, what are you doing, dude? You could have went to the press conference also and said, yeah, I blew the game, man. Bill Walsh, every loss, Bill Walsh, he's like, it's on me. Every win is on the assistant coaches and the players. All glory to them. And he just never takes responsibility, man. It's sickening. Nick,
you're fired up because Jordan Mason didn't touch the ball?
No, I'm fired up because Andy Reid used his other tight ends to get receptions when Kelsey was on the bench, and he could have used Mason to get in there to run a couple plays because Mason runs really hard, and not to give the guy one carry in the Super Bowl is just criminal.
Nick, thanks. We haven't seen Jordan Mason in weeks. When's the last time Jordan Mason got a carry?
Well, he got 6 carries against the Rams in the second string game.
So when no one was playing.
Before he had 2 against Washington.
Okay.
5 against Arizona, 4 against Seattle, 2 against Philly. He had none in the playoffs.
Yeah, he had 40 all year.
Correct.
This is not someone,
including 6 against
I don't know.
the Rams.
This is an odd thing to point to. Like, we got to the Super Bowl and we didn't use someone that we never used.
Right.
And the only reason he got those carries midway through the season was because Elijah Mitchell was hurt.
And
Correct.
Elijah Mitchell was hurt.
Correct.
And Eli did perform in the Super Bowl and performed well, by the way. And the D'Amico Ryans comment was no good either, by the way.
He was
Why
getting
didn't
a
you
head
pay
coaching job.
You don't stay as a coordinator when you're offered a head coaching gig.
Yeah.
You couldn't pay D'Amico enough to not go to Houston. By the way, you don't do that to people. You bring up the word disrespect, Nick. That would be disrespectful if you're doing anything other than promoting. Like, if I'm Kyle,
Don't be disrespectful.
you call the Texans and you tell them D'Amico would be an amazing head coach. You make sure that you are helping your people get promoted within the industry.
Now, Anthony Lynn making a lateral move to go to Washington and the Commanders and now be their run game coordinator, that is an interesting one. And I know he goes with Adam Peters, with whom he has a close relationship, and Peters now in Washington, but that's one where you kind of go, huh? Because it's not like he got a job as an OC.
No, but it's probably nothing more than what you just said. Like,
right.
if he's an Adam Peters guy, then he's going with Adam Peters.
Exactly. It's a lateral move
Yeah.
and a chance for him to maybe have more say.
Maybe.
When you're coaching underneath Kyle Shanahan, and I'm sure got some input on things, but Kyle's going to run it the way he wants to run it.
Maybe, although if I'm a running game coordinator, I'd like to stay with Christian McCaffrey. I think that puts you in a better position to win than going to the Washington offense.
Right,
Doesn't even
but
have
if you want to
quarterback.
maybe have a chance to get that next job and get elevated.
I get you.
If you're, because you're not going to be the offensive coordinator here. That's for sure.
No.
There isn't one.
No, there isn't. There's never going to be one.
Yeah.
You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco. Always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch and YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. The smart choice for low auto loan rates and super simple online application process. Let's go next to Vince in the city. Hi, Vince. What's up?
Hey, what's up, guys? I just wanted to say I kind of agree with Dibs on that take with hiring Steve Wilks. If you look at the last few seasons, it was pretty clear that our secondary play was abysmal. They were getting cooked in a lot of games, especially the high pressure games, just broken coverages and penalties and stuff. So I believe in hearing what you guys are saying about the staff, you would keep the personnel and the coaching staff the same, and you would add Steve Wilks in where there's a vacancy in hopes everything from before stays the same, because our run defense was top tier forever. But then you have Wilks come in and help, solidify the secondary on the back end, which I think it kind of happened, but it kind of didn't, because our DBs played better this season. But then the second half of the season, our line was giving up a lot of runs up the middle, and it was just, little gashes here and there that would really flip field position and give other teams, extra chances to score, which is what happened in Kansas City, or against Kansas City.
Yeah, Vince, I don't disagree at all. I just, to me, that's not worth it. You know what I mean? The hopes of securing or shoring up a defensive backfield that I didn't think was playing all that badly last year anyway. And in fact, conceptually, I'd argue the 49ers are always a group that wants to focus on the defensive line play. And they would hope that their secondary plays better because of their defensive line. That's why they went out and drafted Nick Bosa, number 2 overall. Their secondary famously had 2 interceptions in an entire year. Then they brought in Nick Bosa, and the exact same secondary had 17 the next year. Because you have a great pass rush, suddenly your secondary gets better. The whole thing's got to be married. I'm just someone who also, by the way, and maybe I'm gullible, but I believe a lot of these guys when they talk, and I look at their body language and just their regular language. And if you listen to Nick Bosa all year, I know when he's in front of a microphone, his personality is kind of just like, I'm just about to fall asleep. I get that, but I saw a body language that to me felt very frustrated and confused at times as to why things were not working at the level they should work. Like, this is strange to me that this has been discussed this way. I know he held out
Yeah.
The defensive player of the year came back this year with the biggest deal in NFL history and didn't even get a vote the following year. That has to be bigger to me than just something wrong with Nick. Like,
it's part of it, yeah. But
there
Nick
is
himself said that the holdout definitely in the contract was a distraction. And that's why he had a slow start to the year.
A slow start. How about the rest of it?
He was pretty good in the playoffs.
I know he was pretty good, but even you would agree it doesn't look and feel quite right. And I think that he felt the same way. And I think his comments since then have proven that.
Yeah, I think if you look at, how the team played, and I'll punch up the sack numbers and the pressure numbers with Steve, without Steve. I was looking at their pass defense. This year they were 5th in net yards allowed in the pass game. Last year they were 11th without Steve Wilks. So that would indicate to me that, the pass defense on the back end with a similar pass rush was a little bit better this year in terms of net yards allowed. This year they were 8th in sacks. They had 48 sacks.
Yeah, and remember Cheryl Bosa comes on with us and goes, no, it's not just about stats.
Right.
And that's true. It is somewhat about stats.
No, come on.
Yeah, Cheryl, I'm sorry.
4 more sacks this year than last year.
Yeah, but come on, man. You watch the games.
For sure.
You watch the
pressure
games.
percentage last year was at 22.9. This year their pressure percentage was 21, so a little bit lower.
It
did look a little bit
not right.
It didn't look to be as game wrecking.
Yes.
And if you think about the upgrade, Javon Hargrave injected into the middle of that defense, and he didn't have the kind of year that we remember him having in Philadelphia.
Right.
That's for sure.
No doubt.
And Armstead didn't get hurt until later in the year. Cleveland Ferrell was there for a lot of the year. You brought in Chase Young. He flashed a little bit. Randy Gregory had some flash plays, but by and large, you think about all those names, Armstead and Bosa and all the rest of them, they should have been ferocious.
Hargrave was pointed out by almost every NFL expert. They're like, that is the free agent signing of the offseason.
Yeah.
And he was fine.
There's your word.
He was fine.
There's your word.
Yeah. And I believe that he's going to be a lot better next year. I think that, I'll predict that right now. I don't even know who the DC is going to be. But I'll tell you that next year, you're going to be like, oh, this is what we expected to be getting from Hargrave. Because I think Kyle Shanahan's going to go back to the tree. And to me, that's the phrase. That's what he's got to go back to the tree. Diego, Walnut Creek. What's up, Diego? How's the East Bay?
Hey, guys. Just driving in the rain.
Yeah, man. Tell it to stop soon because we're going to get off work here in an hour and 52 minutes.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right.
But all right. So I wanted to talk about. It's been a few days since the game, and I feel like we as fans and even Shanahan, we're all trying to think back of what cost us the game. What was the reason? Brock played good. The defense played good, in my opinion. But it comes down to details. I clearly remember a couple plays specifically where Tony Romo, right before the play, one of them was the Chiefs had a third down, and right before the play, Tony Romo was like, "Oh, they're coming in. There's a blitz coming in." And when he said that, I knew that if he knows it, Patrick knows it. And just like that, they had a play call when McKinnon slipped right up to the right, and there's a dump off, and they had a first down. And in the Niners side, on the last play where Chris Jones comes in flying, Romo said it right before the play. Watch out, Brock, there's a blitz coming. And we just were not prepared. So I think that, it was the details that Shanahan is looking for. And I don't know, maybe Steve Wilks was too predictable. We weren't prepared, so I think he got the short end of the stick and he got fired. But there is the details that we need to improve on.
Diego, thanks. Yeah, I don't think anybody can disagree with that, and it's up to everybody. And unfortunately, on each individual play to kind of assess where the attention to detail went wrong. There are a few times where either Kyle Shanahan or Steve Wilks probably had something out there that didn't work. That's part of football. There were plays that Brock Purdy didn't see, and then there were missed assignments on the part of offensive line, defensive backfield. There was all of it. There was all of it. So all of that is fair and true. But here's my takeaway so far post Super Bowl. In 3 days, we've learned that there was a lot more going on behind the scenes than we realized. And that is what is relevant now, because that's what's going to rear its head going forward. In 72 hours, the defensive coordinator has been fired.
Yeah.
Brandon Ayuk, his girl, and his brother are all on social media. NFL Films has audio of Kyle Juszczyk saying, I didn't know what was going on in overtime. Nick Bosa has said we were not prepared and followed it by saying Steve Wilks is really good with the back end of the defense. And John Feliciano has thrown Spencer Burford under the bus and gotten into a total war of words with Jalen Carter of the Eagles, which was over 2 months ago, and what they said to one another.
And we learned that the Chiefs were rejoicing when Kyle Shanahan elected to take the ball in overtime.
Correct. So
openly saying, they want the ball. They want the ball.
What really stinks is in 3 days, to me, the Super Bowl loss is getting more painful, not less.
The Cranberries had a song, Mark, their big #1 hit. Did you have to let it linger?
Yeah.
And that's what this feels like.
It is. Every day I wake up and it gets worse. Somebody's got a video where they're like, look, we found another spot where the Niners screwed it up.
And I showed you the 3rd and 4 at the 2-minute warning where Ayuk is open.
He's open. Brock missed him. Pacheco's running down the middle of the street looking like GP2 with a water gun in a parade.
No.
I mean, like the whole thing just gets more painful because a lot of what's going on with the 49ers, not all of it, it felt a little bit like a house of cards. The dam broke. 72 hours. That's all it's been. 72 hours. We've gotten all that. That's one of the worst post-Super Bowl hangovers in an immediate form, I think, that I've ever seen.